Yeah, so hi everyone. So welcome to the sixth event hosted by OCD Acceptance. OCD Acceptance is a platform to help bring OCD patients closer to mental health professionals and advocates. And twice a month, I will host a live event just like this one, inviting mental health professionals and advocates to share their stories and insights on living with OCD. On this episode, I'd like to welcome Julia Briz to you. I hope I pronounced her name right. Is the founder of my OCD diary, and she was diagnosed with OCD years ago, and she did some research and Anyway, so she will talk about unconventional therapies with you today, and let's welcome Julia to talk about the topic. There you go.
Hi. So my name is Julia, and so basically with me, I went through a lot of different things, as most people do with mental illness. There's a lot of trial and error, a lot of secrecy, a lot of experimentation, and it's really tough to know what to do, especially when there's conflicting information. And so what I want to talk about today is unconventional treatments, which is a lot of what I did to get better. And so the first thing I want to mention is that since I'm not a doctor, I can't really recommend anything, but I can share my testimony and explain what I did to kind of help my situation, and hopefully some ideas might come around that might help someone else too. So the classics with OCD are therapy and medication, specifically SSRIs and MAOIs. So I'm going to go over briefly just what those are. So the typical therapy is going to be cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and it's got a very high success rate of about, I think the last time I checked, it was well over 70%. And SSRIs are antidepressants. It stands for serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So even though someone with OCD, their chief complaint may not be depression, the antidepressants can be helpful because they control the serotonin level in the brain. So, which they believe is kind of what causes, or at least is somehow correlated to OCD. And those can be, they don't have quite as high of a success rate, but when used with therapy, they can be helpful. I've never tried that myself. I've tried therapy, but I've never tried SSRI, so I can't really attest to my personal experience with them. But they do have a high risk of side effects, which is why I haven't tried them. So I've just been a little scared, which is kind of funny because, I don't know, that's OCD, right? You're just kind of scared of everything. But, I'm going to be honest, I've really worked through a lot, and I would say right now my OCD is mostly asymptomatic. And I don't know if I can really attest it to one specific thing. I think it was just a lot of different layers that got peeled back. And it's not really, therapy or medication or, a special anything. It's kind of everything. So for me, the most important thing and the first thing I did was get a diagnosis, and that helped me feel validated to know what was going on. After I did that, I was like, okay, let's move forward and let's fix this. I want to be done with it. I tried CBT, and I didn't really like it. I did about 8 sessions, and a lot of it has to do with exposure, facing your fears, which to me was like the worst idea ever, because OCD is all about avoiding your fears. But it was a little helpful in the sense that I kind of learned a little bit about my level of anxiety and how high it was going to go and what I could tolerate and deal with. So it was actually fine. I could have, if I stuck with it, I think it would have helped. But I decided to try something else. So what I did was ACT, which stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. It's a mindfulness-based approach created by Stephen Hay. He's an awesome therapist from Reno, Nevada. And that therapy is very similar to CBT in the sense that it does focus on a little bit of exposure, but it's a little bit more Eastern in philosophy, which I kind of liked. Because for me, a lot of my obsessions had to do with stuff that, my compulsions rather, they had to do more with stuff that went on in my brain. I would blink a lot, or I would count numbers a lot. So for me, the idea of therapy was so challenging, because how is a therapist going to help me to stop mentally counting. They're not going to call me on it because obviously they can't see me doing it. And I was a little manipulative, and I kind of, worked my way around it. So it didn't seem very plausible. My issue was I didn't really care that I had to hand wash all the time. I didn't care that I took 8 showers a day. I didn't care that my hands were bleeding all the time. I cared. But the point was, what I really was bothered by was the mental stuff. Like the behavioral, the driving around, reparking over and over and over again, pushing buttons all the time, light switches. That was frustrating. But what really killed me was these mental thoughts of like, oh, something terrible is going to happen to someone I love if I don't flip this light switch over and over and over again. And I hated that because I really felt like someone else was in my head, which I think a lot of people know what that feels like. And so if the idea with ACT was that you could the idea was that you would learn how to tolerate some of that, and then by proxy, your behavioral symptoms would just not manifest as much. And I like that. I liked working on that more. And so I did about a year of that, going twice a week, and it was really, really helpful. So at this point, my OCD was manageable. When I first started, it was very severe. I didn't really work. I couldn't really keep a job because the germ issue for me was really powerful. I dropped out of school because I couldn't really, there's just so much going on. I also had issues with getting sick all the time. I couldn't sleep, so I was trying to self-medicate with that. So I was definitely using a lot more alcohol and smoking more marijuana and stuff because I just was trying to control how awake I was and how sleepy I was, because I felt like my body could do that by itself. And so I was just, I don't know, not very comfortable. People told me exercise helped, but I was kind of frustrated hearing the eat well, exercise bit. I thought it was stupid, but there's truth to it. But it is frustrating when you're dealing with such a severe thing and someone's telling you something so basic that might take the edge off. And that's not really what I wanted or what I really needed to happen. So after I did ACT, I ended up seeing a naturopathic doctor. And this to me was a really big turning point. And before I get into that, I also want to mention that EMDR is another type of therapy. It's really interesting. It has to do with rapid eye movement. I had a friend that did that for his OCD and said it was really helpful. So again, that's called EMDR. So back to my naturopathic doctor. So I went to go see her, and it was amazing because she had helped me work on my nutrition, my diet, and I was already gluten intolerant. I wasn't eating any gluten. I wasn't drinking any coffee either because I was having seizures and the caffeine was stimulating. And I also noticed that the caffeine was making me kind of anxious. And I was really interested at this point about how food could play into my health because I'd read a study out of Australia that said that caffeine tended to trigger more anxiety in people. And I thought, well, the last thing I want is a stimulant because I'm already like hyper-stimulated all the time. So I knew that caffeine probably was not a good idea for me, and the gluten didn't help, so I was trying not to eat that. So I go to see my naturopathic doctor, and she takes me off a bunch of different foods and tells me to eat a lot of those foods, and then we do a lot of supplements. And I was incredibly skeptical, but I mean, it's like, sure, bring it on. So because at that point, I was ready to try anything, I wanted to move past this. I wanted to be a normal person. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to figure this out. And I was tired of looking at life through a window when I felt that I was completely different. And even though I was high functioning and all that in a lot of ways, I still couldn't do basic things. And it was just kind of humiliating and really frustrating. So, I mean, the way I saw it, I could try to beat it or life was going to suck. So I didn't want life to suck. I tried a lot of stuff like kava kava, which is a nice sedative. And I tried using psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And that was really interesting, actually. I did that about 5 or 6 times. So that one, I had read a study from MAPS, and they're an organization on the East Coast, and they experiment a lot with, they study a lot of different drugs and how they can affect different things. So they were doing a study on mushrooms and how they affected OCD and cluster headaches. And they said it was kind of beneficial. So I was all on board. So I tried it, and I noticed my symptoms got drastically better the next day. It was really cool. Then I think after about 3 months, my symptoms came back. So then I tried it again about 6 months later, and then my symptoms went away again, but only for about a month this time. And then I tried it again, and then kind of got shorter and shorter each time, so less and less effective. But the best thing about this experience for me was that I had a lot of doctors ask me, do you want to be happy? Let's talk about your goals. And I didn't really know how to answer that question, because to me, happiness was this elusive idea that people were talking about, and I didn't know what that was like, because I wasn't trying to go back. I wasn't like, oh man, I wish things could get back to the way they were. I'd always been this way. I didn't know how to see my life as something totally different. So I didn't know how to answer the question if I want to be happy or not. And I knew that sounded silly, because the right answer is, of course, I want to be happy. But that was what was cool for me about experimenting with that, with the mushrooms, because I got to see life, what it was like without having OCD for a little while. And that was really cool, because that gave me perspective on what could be. I tried group therapy, didn't like that. I think it could be helpful because you can have the sense of camaraderie and meet other people. But for me, I felt a little uncomfortable. Just personally, I'm a little more introverted. I don't know if I like the group setting quite as much with that sort of thing. And I tried a couple different supplements. Some of them I kind of know has helped. Some things didn't really help. And that was a guessing game. And that's why I needed to see a naturopath, because it was just hard to pick, which vitamin I needed or which supplement I should try. I needed someone who actually knew what they were doing to kind of, customize something for me and say, hey, you need this and this and this. And that's what I did. So I went home. It was a little expensive to pay out of pocket, but I was already spending a lot in medical bills, so I was kind of prepared for that. And I experienced a very positive, drastic turnaround in my symptoms. So I followed the diet to a T. I did everything she said, and I, tried my best. And I mean, I will say that for OCDs, you're pretty good at, following through on that kind of stuff. So I started backing off on smoking weed, but I kept drinking, and I kind of was like, oh, maybe I should stop that too. And that's a valuable thing that I had to figure out, is that it's really difficult to try to be healthy in one area and not healthy in another. And if you're going to heal your body or your mind, you kind of have to heal everything. So that was a kind of a big deal for me, was figuring out, okay, I can't just ignore some things and pay attention to other symptoms that I want to treat. So it was the mind and the body together, which is a colossal effort, but it's so worth it. And, that's the thing. It's all about committing to not quitting and just moving forward and, trying and not giving up, which can be really scary sometimes. But it is about both the physical and the mental. And so exercise is important. If you're on SSRIs, exercise, help flush out whatever you've been taking, because sometimes the half-life can, you stack up and you can build up some stuff in your liver. So exercise help flush it out. And also that can make the drug, whatever, the SSRI, anything, can be a little more effective that way. So if it's helpful. And plus natural endorphins can be really nice. I personally really notice a difference when I exercise. And as far as nutrition goes, that's something that's very specific to everyone. But I can't say for me, caffeine was a stimulant. It was not helping. It was also depleting me of magnesium and other electrolytes, which is definitely not helping, because magnesium can be helpful for sleep, which I wasn't really getting. And so that was causing an issue for me, because the more I wasn't sleeping, the more stressed out I got, and the more I stressed about not sleeping, and then the more I didn't sleep, and it was really awful cycle. And so I stayed away from other stimulants too, like no hard drugs, no cocaine. I didn't do any of that stuff. And I really worked on the sugar. And for me, I noticed the sugar is a huge thing. If I cheat and have sugar again, I just start to notice the anxiety come back. So for me personally, that's something that was affecting me. And the gluten, I don't think the gluten really played a part in terms of my mental health directly, but I think it's kind of like if you're sick and you walk down the aisle with a bunch of cleaners, you might be a little more irritated by the smell because your body's already bogged down, so you're more sensitive to other irritants. So I think that's what I mean by you have to heal the whole body, because if my body's kind of sluggish because I'm eating gluten, I may not be able to tolerate everything else as much. So I was really good on staying with that. Avoiding alcohol, I'm not saying don't drink exactly, but for me, I noticed that it makes me more, if I'm in a good place, it's fine. But if I am not in a good place, then it just can really ramp up the emotions, which can be troubling. But I have some tips I wanted to share too about the mental health component. Because even though my OCD was really alleviated by seeing a naturopathic doctor, there are the days that just really suck and I have a moment and I kind of need something. And that's where the tools from therapy really came in. So the first thing that's so important is I kind of really learned about should versus shouldn't. So I thought, oh, you know what, I shouldn't watch TV because that's so bad for me, and it's not a good idea. And I should watch the news because that's really good to be informed. But the truth is, I hated watching the news because it stressed me out. And I wanted to watch TV because I love TV and it helps me relax and helps me get out of my brain. So I thought I learned that in therapy. It's like a better way to calm down than to just watch a little bit of TV and to not watch the news, which I know is going to stress me out. So it was respecting myself, like doing things that even if people think, oh, you should watch TV, helps me feel better. I figured out that taking showers helps really calm me down. So if that means taking a couple in a day, I really do feel it. Journaling is also a really big one for me. So I journal, and I've found that it helps to just sort of get my emotions out, and I don't let anyone see it because that's not the point. And I don't want to, you feel judged, when you let someone see it and you kind of sense that you're writing. So I think it's a good idea to just do something for you. And my family's been really supportive. I think it's really been helpful to find people that I can talk to and communicate with when I need to ask for help, which is really, really, really hard to do. And a lot of times I don't ask for help because I don't really know why. It's almost like I forget. I just get stressed out and tunnel vision-y, and then people get mad when I don't ask them for help, but it's just really hard to do. But I'm working on it because I always feel better when I do. I just don't always remember to do it. So if I'm sleepy or hungry or stressed out, I know it's probably going to make my OCD worse. So I tell myself that it's temporary and that once I get some more sleep and eat something, I probably won't be quite as upset. And sometimes when I am upset, I ask myself, hey, am I hungry? Am I sleeping? And if I am, I'm like, okay, I need to take care of that. That could be a big factor. And I think above all else, it's really important to know that you are not alone in this, because there's a stigma and it is hard, but the truth is OCD is not your fault, and it doesn't define who you are. So it is a part of your story, but it's just one part, and there's so much more. So just stay strong and do what's right for you. The right therapy, the right treatment is very specific to what's going to be best for you and whenever you're ready. It's not because you have to, because you need to, because you should. It's when you want to. And so hopefully that helps. And that's all I got.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing. Yeah, so I believe from you today. So I have questions.
Yeah.
And first of all, just before all the remind our viewers again, no coffee, because that's what I said last time during the last episode, acceptance, and so then we group is the acceptance and acceptance. So what does the word acceptance mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. Acceptance. Oh, that's hard. Okay, so acceptance is very different from tolerance, which I think is what we want to do with our minds. We just want to put up with it and deal with it. But acceptance means to actually really be okay with something. And something I've mentioned before is that I kind of had to see OCD as a cockroach a little bit. And it's really awful when you find a cockroach in your house and you can go, oh my God, it's terrible, and freak out. You want to kill it or call your boyfriend in to kill it for you because it's a bug or whatever. But I had to actually be cool with it. Like, okay, the cockroach is in my house. We're going to share this space, and that's okay. Like, and you have to move past that level of like, I hate the cockroach here. You just have to be like, okay, he's here, and I'm going to move on. and he's going to be in his space, be in mine. Occasionally we'll interact with each other, but I can still be happy. I can still have my life. But the more you obsess about the cockroach and get angry about it being in your life, and the more you try to fight at it, it's just going to drive you crazy, because either way, the cockroach is there regardless or not. So
That works. And yes, second question: should people ask for help? Because for some people, they think that their parents, or they get the stigma that the miss or treat crazy person. So they don't want one. They don't want to seek help. So if I ask you, should people ask for help? What would you think about it?
yeah, that's really difficult because there are people, and also it depends on your family, your city, the culture. There's so many aspects that play into how accepted you might be seen by having disclosed a mental illness. So it has to be done safely. So, and that can be challenging. Like, do you feel safe or unsafe? Because is it, I'm trying to think of how best to phrase this. Do you feel unsafe because there's actually a danger, or unsafe because your mind is sort of messing with you and it's your OCD, and that's the challenge? So I would advise anyone, if they don't have family they can talk to about this, online is a great resource, because there are so many forums out there right now and so many different blogs and websites where people are very open and very nurturing and accepting of this. And that might be a good place to start, until that person can find someone in their life who they feel comfortable with disclosing, because that's really what it's about, is feeling safe enough to find someone that you're really ready to share that with. Because the burden of this is that you feel alone, and it's so difficult to know who to talk to. And if you open up to the wrong person, you're going to go, shoot, I'm never doing that again. That was the worst idea of my life. And then you might not want to tell anyone. And that could be a problem, because then you might miss out on somebody who could really be helpful. So there's a practice and strategy to it. And if there's a mistake made sometimes where you tell the wrong person, try to remember that it's not always going to be that way, because we're just always going to have that where people kind of are not that nice to us about this. But they are out there. So it's a case of finding out who those people are.
That's true. Yeah, we get a lot of misunderstandings, but a lot of helps from us. The question is, should people take medication? From your, like, I just talked to started taking medication. Everyone worries about the side effects, worries about the well at work. It's medication after all. They don't feel
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal choice. I didn't do it because I was really afraid of the side effects, although I was highly encouraged to do so. And I was told that if I didn't like it, I could stop and pretty much be fine, if I did have a side effect. And I have friends that use them and absolutely feel relief and really like them and can't imagine not having them. And I have other friends that tried them and didn't like them at all. So it's a personal choice, and there's a level of experimentation that I think is required to get through OCD. So that's why I tried so many different things myself. But I think whatever you decide to do, whether it's using SSRIs or just doing therapy or whatever, I still think that it's absolutely essential to get all other aspects of your health in order. So if you're neglecting maybe a thyroid issue or something, that could obviously play a factor in creating more anxiety. Adding fuel to the fire is never going to be good. So whatever you decide to do, it's still important to get your sleep and exercise and your physical health in track, because a huge part of my OCD was a thyroid issue. So once I got that taken care of, a lot of my anxiety went down. So I think everything's really connected. So you got to kind of attack it from all angles.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Thank you. And I all the viewers out there, there's a new Q&A section on Acceptance website. From all across the country, they will answer the questions. And that's my cat. But anyway, if you have any questions and you that's my cat. Yeah, you can ask questions directly to over a dozen of licensed therapists and to answer. So talk, you can just create and so or so.